Hi everyone, I'm Brandon Averill, one of the partners at AWM, where we advise people in creating multi-generational flourishing families so that we can solve that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves financial epidemic. And this is a front row seat with AWM's Chief Investment Officer, Justin Dyer, and myself, as we discuss some of our clients' most pressing financial questions. This is AWM Insights, and let's dive right in. Well, Justin, we made it. Episode number 100. I can't believe we're here, especially with how this whole thing started off. COVID launched this podcast, and now we're staring Ukraine in the face. So it kind of feels sadly appropriate that we're hitting 100 while the world's in a super interesting space.
Crisis.
It really is, and it's sad. We're definitely in a world of turmoil at the current moment. So, I also think as we move into this discussion today, it's kind of no better lens than to start to look through and really evaluate the role of an advisor that it might play in your situation. So for everybody listening, what we're going to jump into today is, last week we talked about going at it alone. What are some of the things you need to consider? And this week we're going to jump into, okay, for those of you that have decided, hey, I don't want to do this on my own. I don't have the time. I don't have the expertise. I need somebody in my corner. I need a team in my corner to help me through this entire process of building out my financial structure, building out my investment portfolio. Now, what do I do? There are, roughly 300,000 people in the U.S. that call themselves financial advisors. It's unfortunately a pretty easy thing to become a financial advisor. So as we walk through here, let's uncover some of the myths. Let's uncover some of the truths that you should be looking for, Justin. So I'll turn it over to you here. I'd just love to get your thoughts broadly. I know I'm going to get on my soapbox eventually. So before I do that and take over this thing, I'll let you jump in.
Sure. So it's a great topic. You and I love talking about ourselves. So that's what we get to do today. I say that with tongue in cheek. We're probably the most reserved on the team in that sense. I mean, the list of why you may want to consider working with an advisor is pretty long, and I'll hit on a couple. But I think just even starting with what you were saying around kind of one of the downfalls of our industry is that there's no true professional standards. Unfortunately, there are some really, really, really meaningful designations, but there's not a big centralized body. There's no regulatory body that says, okay, yeah, you can call yourself a financial advisor. Similar to what happens within the medical profession or the legal profession. Not anyone can call themselves a doctor for good reason. Not anyone can call themselves a lawyer for good reason. And it's unfortunate that the same thing does not apply in our industry. It really is, and it's to the detriment of society, in my opinion. Where and we've heard the stories around advisors and financial firms just outright stealing money, and it happens unfortunately all too frequently. And we as an industry have not done ourselves any favors in that respect. On the bright side, there are some really, or on the positive side, there are some pretty easy things to look at if you're making this decision, and we'll get into kind of what those really legitimate designations are, questions to ask maybe even, but it's not like this is all a big black box of an industry. I think, unfortunately, the gift of gab and the sales approach that happens, and taking advantage of events like what's happening right now within Eastern Europe and Ukraine and Russia, where your broker is you reach out, or maybe you don't work with a broker, or someone's gonna reach out and say, oh, you got to sell, or buy this and that, and they're taking advantage of these loss of life and some unfortunate situations in Ukraine at a minimum, but also just our own behavioral reactions to certain things. Like, hey, the markets are going down. Well, first of all, that is probably a good thing. It's natural. It's a natural outcome of markets. Markets have volatility. They go up and down set that aside. But it's very easy to take advantage of that when you're talking to individuals that maybe don't necessarily understand it all, or are asking questions, or really in tune with what's going on. So, so bringing it back to the question that you at least said at the beginning, some common reasons that you might want to consider is that, hey, there's a lot to lose. Generally speaking, the clients that are listening, or the potential clients or listeners to this podcast are very wealthy. They've made a decent amount of money, or may make a decent amount of money going forward. They have that untapped human capital. And really, you take a step back and you're like, well, wait a second, there's a lot at stake here, and there's too much to lose to go this alone, making a mistake. The next two, I think, are actually the most important. That if you are looking at things in isolation and looking at the present day crisis, whether that be COVID 2 years ago or the Ukraine crisis right now, and kind of missing the forest for the trees, you're leaving money on the table. So what does that mean? We take a step back and look at things from a holistic, after tax, after cost, overall benefit to you, right? We always love to say, hey, you have one net worth, one effective tax rate, and everything we do goes towards maximizing and optimizing those two data points, from an investment perspective, from a planning perspective. And that, by having that mindset, and there's studies that corroborate this, we're not just saying that, but if you can focus on that and that holistic viewpoint, you are likely, let me say, I always have to qualify everything, you're likely to add value and outperform the alternative, right? Just picking stocks, or just kind of looking at your investments in isolation, your estate plan in isolation, et cetera, your taxes in isolation. And then there's some really just kind of quality of life considerations as well. There's a benefit for paying someone to think about this for you. It takes that burden off your shoulders, and that might resonate with some people, maybe not others. And then it's also just a partnership too, where a lot of people we work with are incredibly intelligent individuals, and you can make the argument that they could probably do this, or come and if they wanted to make a career change, they could probably work in this field. But they also value the partnership, the coaching aspect of it, to help, whether it's their family or themselves personally, get through some sort of question or issue, business, personal, multi-generational, charitable, whatever it is. There's a ton of value there. And then again, kind of continuing the qualitative value too, where the multi-generational component really comes into play, where if something, God forbid, were to happen to any number of head of households within a certain relationship, there's a continuation plan kind of built in place, with having a trusted advisor in place. So, those are some really, really good, I think, tangible, meaty, valuable examples that I would throw out there.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic, Justin. I think one of the places I'd love to sit on for a second too is just the coaching aspect. I think there's a great analogy. I mean, a lot of people listening to this are athletes, and you could be a self-taught person, right? But what we know about hiring a coach is, and what most elite people do in life, is if they want to get better at something, they hire a coach, because the coach is going to help them, even if it's incrementally get a little bit better. The value proposition of that is so significant. And I think it would be the same way. You could certainly look at it the same way. If you're looking for somebody to give you advice on how do you develop your financial structure, how do you invest money, how are you tax efficient, how you do these things, and it doesn't really take a whole lot, right? It just takes a little incremental getting better gain to make the value benefit huge in the large scheme of things. So I think, it's probably time we hit on what, is probably the worst kept secret, at least amongst our financial industry, but for the public doesn't often realize that, is that, we've talked about this, not that hard to become a financial advisor, unfortunately. And what the secret is that unfortunately most aren't experts, right? They're salespeople in disguise. They're not held to a standard that you would think is extremely common. I'm always it's sad when you talk to new prospects or clients about this, they find out that it's actually not every financial advisor's duty to do what's in their best interest. I think that's just like mind blowing to most people, and it should be, because it's really poor standard. But there is a group of people that only have to act in a suitable way, and we won't go too far into depth on that. But I think when we start to look at advice and who we would say are a couple considerations that you should be taking a look at when you say, hey, okay, I want advice, let's start to evaluate people. Two things that should absolutely be your primary lenses to start to look through. One is conflict. What are the conflicts? I think really looking at that, are they selling you some product? Do they have a reason that they're pushing a specific product upon you? Does their compensation change because of that? Or are they truly giving you advice? They're just selling you advice. So there's still a economic benefit, right? But you look at those things, and if there's a conflict of, hey, I have to try to get you to buy this specific product because that's the only way I make money, or I make more money, my personal opinion, that's probably not a conflict I want to live with. But just go through the line and try to look at all those different conflicts. And then I think the bigger one for me is competence. Unfortunately, most of our industry is sales. It's a sales-driven culture. You even go back to the big firms. I mean, where I started, Morgan Stanley, it's very much, hey, start dialing for dollars. Delay getting the CFP because, I need to know, Morgan Stanley needs to know from the get-go, hey, is this person going to bring enough business in for us to continue to pay them? Is this going to work out? And they're not willing to make the investment in people or at least when I was there, they weren't willing to make the investment in people to see how that all played out. So unfortunately, most advisors are using strategies that end up doing more harm than they're actually doing good. And the sad part is maybe they do this, knowing it won't work. I would argue maybe even worse is they don't realize it. We see this a lot with some of these big life insurance firms, really good people. I just don't think they realize that they're not doing what's in the best interest of the client because they haven't taken the time to really further their expertise. They drink through the fire hose that their employer gives them, but they don't actually go out and develop the expertise that it takes to advise families. And a lot of times, I'll stop on this point, but back to the conflict, I think a great question to ask is who owns the firm that you're going to work for? And who are they making decisions to benefit? So you have the big Wall Street firms, of course, are publicly traded. Their number one duty is back to the shareholder. And then you've got, even on the independent side more recently, all these firms taking private equity money. And now I have to produce a certain return for my private equity investors. And if I don't do that, my business is in trouble. So we're definitely very biased on this. We're an employee-owned firm. We always will be. For that reason, because I think it just aligns us so much better with our clients.
Yeah, I mean, everything you hit on are great and really easy questions, research items to sink your teeth into if you're going down this path. It gets back to that professional standard or lack thereof requirements within our industry, which again, I think is really unfortunate. And, a similar way to kind of think about it is you don't see, most law firms are partnerships owned by the partners that are actually still practicing for this exact reason. Accounting firms, very, very similar. And these are industries that have long-standing professional standards, and our industry is really pushed against that. To your point about private equity coming into our world, and kind of, throwing around huge checks to some of these firms that are almost too good to walk away. There's not an alignment with the way in which we service clients with shorter term transactional money. I had a conversation with a VC, venture capitalist, recently about this exact topic, and they actually agreed with me in this sense where, we're building relationships, and we want a firm that the clients know intimately and is going to be along with them over their life journey, and again, multi-generational is our goal as well with the firm and the family relationships. There's a venture firm backed financial advisory firm it's almost completely counter to that goal, where guess what, that venture capital firm or funded firm is going to sell out to a big bank, go public, and you separate those alignment of interests quite substantially in those situations. So again, something to keep in mind, and kind of ask as you're kicking the tires. And in addition to just some basic credentials around competency, right? CFP, CPWA, CFA, these are things we all talk about, and we take pride in on our team. A lot of these, to be totally fair, are kind of table stake type certifications. You need to have an element of always seeking knowledge and doing what's in the best interest of the client and all of that. And those are almost, unmeasurable things, but hopefully that can come out through interviews and conversations. But at a bare minimum, some of these things around, fiduciary standard is what you were alluding to, which is doing things in the best interest of the client. And asking, hey, do you invest your money the same way that you're advising me to invest my money? I mean, that's a powerful one right there, and really easy to flesh out some information, especially within this broker model where these guys, to your point, are salespeople. They're glorified salesmen that are selling an investment and probably not able to put their money in every single investment that they sell as well, because it's just the model doesn't align for it. So yeah, some simple questions that you can really think about. And at the end of the day, I really want to underscore the fact that the industry is actually an incredibly powerful force for good if you know which path to go down. I alluded to the studies at the outset that show the value of advice. This is a specific type of advice and type of business relationship within the advisor space. Again, I've seen mortgage brokers call themselves financial advisors. There's no restriction on who can say it, but if done properly, the benefits are incredible. And in most of these studies, they actually show pretty substantial benefits. Vanguard has a big one. Vanguard Advisor Alpha says something around 3% additional net returns by working with an advisor. I mean, if you think about a 3% additional return compounded over the life of a relationship, that is substantial. For those of you that aren't math whizzes out there, I mean, a simple 1%, even less than 1% rate of return differential over long periods of time can be such a substantial difference in dollars and value dollars at 30, 40, 50 years down the road. It's pretty powerful when you think about it that way.
I couldn't agree more, Justin. And I think at this point in this discussion, I think we'll get as bold as saying, if the first question, right, as you're working through that fiduciary standard, if the person sitting in front of you or the person you're potentially talking to is a broker, just pass go and go to the next one. I mean, do yourself the favor of just eliminating a whole bunch of noise and move on. The way to check that, there's a website. It's brokercheck.org. You can go on there and you can search. You put the name in of the person. It's going to pull up. And if it says they're a broker, just move on. What you're looking for is investment advisor. I would encourage everybody start there. That is going to filter out 90% of the noise. And then the next question becomes, okay, great. Now I've got this, semi-qualified, I guess, person in front of me. Let me start to evaluate the person and the firm for conflict and for competence. Have they pursued advanced designations? What kind of conflicts exist, etc. But if you do that, I mean, you're putting yourself far and away above everybody else. And then it moves to, okay, what's the advice model? What do I really need here? Am I looking for just an investment portfolio? Just very basic asset allocation. Am I looking for financial planning at a greater whole, which we would encourage everybody to do? We think the value is certainly there. And for those that are in that multi-generational wealth perspective, am I getting access to a family office? And I think those are, that's where you can start to go down this path. And we've talked about the differences on previous episodes of this podcast, and I'm sure we'll get into it more. But I feel like, Justin, I don't know if that resonates with you, but that's basically how I'd work through this. At a very basic level, get yourself into a really good position to get a lot of really good advice, is knock out all those brokers, and then figure out, the conflict, competence, and what investment or what advice model I ultimately want.
Yeah, definitely. And, throw in there, at a minimum, there should be some credentials on the team. And I want to underscore the fact that you or the comment you made around the model. There's so many good firms that are doing only investment focused advice and charging you a fairly large amount for that. That's good. It's not a terrible thing if you've kind of gone through this whole checklist of items that we've touched on. But it's truly our belief, and again, there's studies and plenty of data and research that backs this up, that if you're looking at things in isolation, just your portfolio, and you have your accountant over here, your CPA firm over there, the two don't really talk in an integrated fashion to one another. Same thing on estate planning. Whatever it is, there's all these interesting subject areas within finance and financial planning that if you're looking at them in isolation, you are likely not optimizing your overall net worth, your overall tax rate, your bottom line, if you will. And that's why we are set up the way we are, to be fully integrated, independent of the big banks and a sales environment. And then individualize, right? That gets to your family office piece, where really, really, really custom approach to everything that's specific to clients' goals and priorities, including the investment portfolio. A lot of what happens on with firms that are only doing investments is they're still putting you in a model portfolio that is one of 10 to 20 models that they operate, as opposed to a tailor-made portfolio specific to you. So we are set up for that, and that's why obviously we're biased in that sense, but for good reason. I think we've all thought about this quite a bit, and happy to go in further on any one of those topics, like why as to why we might be set up a certain way.
All right, cool. Well, I think that's a great way to close out episode 100. Hopefully we provided some value for everybody to start to evaluate the relationships that they have, and figure out, hey, am I getting what's in my best interest, or am I unfortunately being sold something that's just suitable? But before we close out, as I announced last week, text me. We got a new text number, place for everybody to join into the AWM Insights community. You can text us your questions, your feedback. Would love to hear what's been resonating with you guys. We heard the NFT episode was a hit. Should we do more special one-offs, continue down this path of some of the fundamentals? We're having a good time with it. Hopefully it's providing some value to you. But to join that text chain, again, just text insights, or you can do the little light bulb emoji. The telephone number is 602-704-5574. Or you can just click on the link in the show notes from your phone and hit send, and that'll get you on the list as well. And lastly, again, one more time, phone number 602-704-5574. And until next time, own your wealth, make an impact, and always be a pro.
The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature, and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.